Be the Talk, episode 212, featuring Jacqueline Boone. Welcome to Be the Talk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself. I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Jacqueline Boone. Jackie, are you ready to talk?
I was born ready.
Jackie Boone is the founder of Boone Consulting, a global digital marketing and learning company, and the creator of blog and web series 6 Months to Live. Jacqueline is at her best when working with mission-driven companies and entrepreneurs to make a profound impact on a global scale. Jacqueline Boone, welcome to the talk.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Your talk is called How Living a Life You Love Can Save the World. And I love this because, hey, Talk Universe, if you've ever thought, maybe when you were a recent graduate or something like that, if you've ever thought about doing something just radical, like, you know, teaching in the middle of rural, middle of nowhere China, that's what Jacqueline did. So we're going to hear the backstory of this. I love the talk, and I love what you shared about that. And it's really a talk about how, you know, many of us, we have access to a global perspective. We have access and privilege and access to the technology and all this awareness. The kids that you were able to teach and had the privilege of teaching in very rural China, they had no knowledge of that. So we got to see through your eyes, through their eyes, kind of the lens of cultural, a little bit, I'll just say, mistrust and a little skepticism from these very young, innocent children, and what you did to eventually win over that trust. Please, Jacqueline, take us behind the talk.
Well, it was, I was the only female foreigner in the town, and I was the second tallest woman in the town. And when I'm 5'7", so I'm tall, but I'm not that tall. And when I arrived, I did not speak Mandarin. So it was just throwing myself into a completely different culture and experience. And so what I realized very quickly is I needed to establish common ground and a common language. So I actually started with sports because I played varsity basketball and volleyball and a bunch of other sports. So I started showing up on the playground, which got me some street credit because basketball is super popular with Yao Ming. Mm-hmm. And then just really being part of the culture, making an effort, understanding. So it was an incredible experience to just even start understanding and not taking for granted. I think a lot of times you graduate. I'm actually finishing my book about that called Heart Language. And one of the lines in it is I graduated a freshly graduated optimist, showing up ready to take on the world. And what I didn't realize is that I think sometimes if you're taking on that kind of initiative, you're in a volunteer mindset. You want to help, but you don't realize that it's actually the culture doesn't necessarily need help, doesn't need help in the way you think they do. So to really connect with them as fellow humans and to understand their perspective.
So I'm hearing three things right there. Number one, okay, we're going to address this out of the way. You were in very rural China, but they knew Yao Ming. So
they did.
Yes. I guess you can't be anywhere in the world and not have popular culture extend if it's big and relevant enough. So was that interesting for you to build that bridge and discover, or did you figure they already knew who he was, or was that a little bit of a surprise to you?
I was definitely surprised. I mean, and China moves so rapidly. So I'm sure it's been 6 years since I've gone back to Mingyuan, and I'm sure if I went back, I'll be going back to China in October. Mm-hmm. It's already transformed a lot. They have access to computer cafes and to movies. What surprised me most was the shared language around American films in particular. So there was a lot of excitement and maybe some misconceptions that everyone has a 3-car garage and lives in a huge house and everyone is rich in the U.S. I think I mentioned in the talk, but at the end I gave an exam, an oral English exam, and I had one of the students say to me, the question was, what did you learn in oral English this year? And she said, at first, I think you are bad because America makes war and war is bad. But then I see that you are friendly. So now I think China and America can be friends. And so for me, that was like, if that's what was accomplished in this year, that's a great way to start, because we have so many, as you said, mistrusts and misconceptions just about each other, whether it's fellow Americans or around the world or China and America.
Yeah, and that was, thank you for going right there to that quote, because that was what I really left and walked away from your talk with, that you were able in the end to win over the trust of these children. And I thought it's almost like a throwback, in a way. And I want to be careful and sensitive in the way that I say this, but 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, we were a lot less, politically correct in, whether we trusted someone, whether we didn't, and what we would say. I'm thinking almost like the Wild West 150 years ago. And there was almost like an echo of that. This child was so candid with you, and there's something very refreshing about that. And it was wonderful that you won that trust. So, what did that strike you in a similar way, or were you just offended perhaps, or how did you take that? How did you react to that?
Well, that's a great question. So, Chinese culture, I have found, and I love China deeply and dearly, and always will, and consider China a second home. So Chinese culture is very direct about things we would never be direct about, and very indirect about things we're direct about. So that, I remember I had a student come up to me. It was, Christmas, and he basically said, "Teacher Jackie, may we give you some advice?" And I was like, oh gosh, I don't know what this is going to be. And he said, "You are too fat. You should lose some weight for the new year."
Oh my.
So it was, a little more direct than I had wanted or expected. But I think that there's such a depth of culture. I mean, 4,000 years of history. The language is beautiful. So it's just, I think it's understanding. And you also have to keep in mind that the students, because they're so focused on education, they're not, there's a youth and an innocence that's there, that's not there. And if you were dealing with a 15-year-old American high school student.
For sure. So, let's go back to this piece. You mentioned it was almost like a Teach for America program or something like that. We're idealistic. We graduate. We want to, we're aware that we're privileged and advantaged, and we want to give back, and we want to save the world, and we want to, do all these things. And I would be sure that you would agree that almost all of that, a very high measure of that, is a very good way to be. And yet, there's a little bit of unseen baggage that we all bring with that enthusiasm to try to maybe fix or change or do things, and it's unseen. What's your advice for the people in our lives? And we want to motivate them. We want to keep them motivated. We don't want to discourage them in any way. But how can we kind of educate or empower people to be aware of a little bit of the hidden downside? Is there a way that do we have to run in and make those mistakes over and over again? Or is there a way we can teach and learn from one another in that way?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nathan. So, it was very similar to Teach for America. It's called World Teach, and it's a Harvard affiliated nonprofit that does a year of teaching in a developing country or part of a country. And I think that it's World Teach is amazing. Teach for America is great. All of these different programs. But I think that we need to check our bias and check our assumptions. And, the book that I'm, writing is called Heart Language, which is rooted in the word Xin Li Hua, which means the inside of your word, or the inside of your heart's language. And I really think it's about connecting with people first, and not necessarily assuming that you know where someone has come from. We just don't know people's stories. We don't know what's going on in their lives. It's that saying, never judge someone until you've walked a day in their shoes. So I think that that's really where it begins. And I think that the idea of, doing great work in the world, is fabulous, but making sure that we are coming to it with an open heart and mind.
Well, we definitely have to earn that respect and earn that trust in order to take another step and move with people. So we've been enjoying this great conversation with Jacqueline Boone. Her talk is called How Living a Life You Love Can Change the World, actually can save the world, rather. And we will be right back with Jacqueline in just a moment with the Blitz Round. People ask, how could I start a 7-day-a-week podcast? It's because of what I've learned from my mentors. Some of the best mentors in history aren't around anymore. They've left hours of one-on-one mentoring behind in their books. Each month at Classics on Tap, I record a new chapter from a classic business book to help you make a difference. Download your first chapter at classicsontap.com. And we're back with Jacqueline Boone. It is time for the Blitz Round. I'm going to ask Jacqueline a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and performance of her recent talk. Jacqueline, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Were you invited to speak or did you apply?
I was invited.
Did you walk out on stage and did you have nerves or were you in the zone or neither or both?
Both. So I actually was, I was just looking it up, Amy Cuddy's talk, you know, the power poses.
Wonder Woman,
I was in a empty room doing the power poses, feeling a lot of nerves before I went on the stage. And then when I went on the stage, I just had this moment of there's nowhere else I'd rather be. There's nothing else I'd rather be doing. There's nothing else I'd rather be talking about. Like I've just felt mostly grateful to be in that moment.
Yeah, well, and Simon Sinek, another famous TEDxer, fellow TEDxer, I'm not nervous. I'm excited. I don't have to do this. I get to do this. That same energy for sure. What's a tip, a tool, or technique that helped you?
So we actually were assigned speaking coaches, which was extremely helpful. And there were two questions, one from him and then one that I asked myself. The one from him was, if this talk is for anyone, who is the one person that this talk is for? And that really helped focus it because actually the talk ended up being geared towards where I was when I was 16 and really focusing on that kind of idea of I want to do something different that makes a difference in my life, but is that really possible? And talking to that younger me or to people that at any stage of life are like that. And then the other question that I ask myself is, I have 8 minutes to share what is most important to me with the world. And like, what's the one thing I want to share with the world in this 8 minutes? So those two questions really help focus it so that it wasn't, hopefully as meandering, is more to the point and succinct.
So, an 8-minute talk, great length, my word. So the cut for time question is, what was the most painful part of this that you had to actually cut out?
Well, there were a lot of questions and stories and anecdotes that I wanted to include because obviously there's a lot of things that happened. I was actually surprised because I timed for 8 and the talk ended up being 6.
Oh, wow.
So it
went
by faster than I thought it would.
Well, we've been enjoying this conversation with Jacqueline Boone. Her talk is called How Living a Life You Love Can Save the World. And if you want to check out that talk, we can show you where to go. Just go to our show notes page at BeTheTalk.com, and we will have a clickable link right there. And if you want to check out what Jackie is doing, find out about her upcoming book, the title again is
Heart Language.
Heart Language. I love it. You can go to BooneConsulting.co, Boone, Boone, consulting.co. And we'll be back in just a moment with the final word of advice for us, Talk Universe. Everyone wants to change the world, but not everyone knows the first step. Before you can change the world with your talk, it has to be selected. So grab the templates, timelines, and tools that I use to get my talk selected at BeTheTalk.com. And we're back with Jacqueline Boone. It is time for the final word of advice.
My final word of advice is live a life worth living. Go out and really connect with people. I think that we get so in our head about all the things that we're supposed to do, and we forget that the top regret of the dying is I wish I'd had the courage to live a life that was true to me. I think that if you are true to yourself and you're true to your heart and you're true to what you're here to do, not only are you going to live an extraordinary life, happy people don't make war. You're going to have so much more to give and to contribute to your community and to those around you.
Jacqueline Boone, thank you so much for coming on the Talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thanks so much, Nathan. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for listening to Be the Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.